Hello and welcome to Click On Sports. I'm your host Harry Kettle, and today we are joined by a very special guest. He is a veteran within the world of professional wrestling, a former TNA standout and a former Ring of Honor world champion. It is none other than Christopher Daniels. Chris, how are you today?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me today.
That's quite alright. And first off, away from wrestling, we're going to talk about a little bit about comic books. What are you reading right now? And for those of you who don't know, how did your love for comic books first blossom?
Well, I don't remember a time when I wasn't reading comic books. I started it as a kid. I got into X-Men early on. The guys that really got me into Marvel Comics were Chris Claremont and John Byrne with their work on Uncanny X-Men. So, I mean, that's how it all started for me. Right now, I read just about everything Marvel puts out. I'm really enjoying the Generations miniseries that just came out. That was a result of the end of the Secret Empire miniseries. And I'm looking forward to what Legacy has to offer with all the new creative teams and titles and things that are coming out through Marvel.
So with all the Marvel comics, does your love for that transition into the movies as well? The Marvel movies?
Oh, absolutely, man. I'm a big fan of all the Marvel movies. I think they've got a really good game plan sort of sorted out as far as like tying all the movies together and giving clues in each movie for the ones that are coming up soon. Yeah, I just think it's all thought out. It's a good plan that they've got going on. And I'm looking forward to Thor Ragnarok coming out next month.
Now, with art forms such as comics, movies, paintings, things of that nature, would you personally say professional wrestling is an art form of some kind, or do you agree with people who perhaps say it doesn't fall into that category?
No, I absolutely think it's an art form. I mean, there's an aspect of storytelling in professional wrestling that, you know, maybe not everybody gets, especially casual fans or people that just look at it on the surface or sort of look at it from afar. I mean, you have to sort of watch professional wrestling. You sort of, to get into depth, you sort of have to watch it over a period of time to understand sort of the ebbs and flows and the story that's going on. I mean, yeah, every match tells a story in and of itself, but also the long arcs of how wrestlers progress from the bottom of the card to the top, how they go from villain to hero to champion to challenger, that sort of stuff. I mean, it's a long-term form of storytelling that I think professional wrestling fans sort of understand and enjoy, and maybe the casual person doesn't really get.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. And whilst on the subject of being away from the squared circle, what other hobbies and interests would you say you have that people may not be familiar with?
That's really it, man. Honestly, I'm a comic book guy first and foremost, and I'm a pro wrestling guy. I mean, I still try to watch as much professional wrestling as I can. I try to find out about the guys that are coming up. I have my certain favorites that I try and watch and sort of learn from. Even at this point in my career, I feel like I'm always learning. And, you know, I check out guys that are different from me and guys that are coming up so I can sort of adjust my own style to welcome the new things that are happening in professional wrestling.
So, on that subject, in terms of veterans who reinvent themselves in the ring, it seems as if you and perhaps Chris Jericho are really leading the way in terms of remaining relevant on a consistent basis. Is there a secret behind your longevity, or does it just kind of come naturally?
Well, I mean, I sort of force myself to try and stick with it. I mean, I recognize that what worked for me 5 years ago might not work for me now. And I try not to become so deeply entrenched in my habits that I try to recognize when things are getting stale and try to change direction if I can. And I think I think Chris Jericho is a perfect example of someone who, you know, enjoys success, but he also challenges himself to do something different and find different things to latch onto, to get people to latch onto. And, you know, that's sort of something that I've tried to incorporate in my thing as well, is trying not to stay stagnant too long. Just try and change before people get too used to what I'm doing.
Now, you're a man who has likely travelled the world wrestling. Is there a place, a country, or a venue that stands out as being the most maybe unique or fun to perform at?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot over the course of my career. I've been very fortunate to work in a bunch of different places. For Japan, Korakuen Hall certainly has the atmosphere that is conducive to great professional wrestling. For one in the UK, I feel like York Hall has sort of come into its own as far as like a venue that, a perfect crowd plus perfect wrestling sort of combined there to make a great atmosphere for an entertaining night of entertainment. As I get redundant there. But I mean, like I said, I've been lucky to perform all over, whether it was for Ring of Honor or for TNA or for independent stuff. It's just a matter of finding, it's not really the venue as much as it's the audience. I've been in great venues that had very quiet crowds or crowds that weren't really into what they were watching. And then I've been in buildings that weren't, top of the line, that had fans that just had an energy that made the whole experience worthwhile. So, I mean, to me, it's not so much the building as much as the people inside.
You mentioned briefly Ring of Honor. You've been a part of Ring of Honor on 2 or 3 separate occasions now over the course of your career. How do you think the company has evolved, and what are some of the biggest differences between when you started and where the company is at today?
Well, I think certainly the biggest difference is the business model for Ring of Honor. I mean, back in the day when we first started with Ring of Honor, DVDs and tape trading was still sort of a thing, and that was sort of the best way to become acclimated to what Ring of Honor had to offer. The DVD sales, it was a sort of a word of mouth thing because it didn't have television back in 2002. It really just had the word of mouth and the reputation on the internet that people would sort of go out of their way to try and find Ring of Honor. Now, 2017, especially since the purchase of Ring of Honor by Sinclair Broadcasting, we're really more about the television show and the live events and the pay-per-views. They sort of support getting eyes on the television product. And I think that's sort of the model of professional wrestling as a whole. I mean, most of the companies that are successful now, a lot of them are basing their profit margins on the television that they've got going on and getting as many eyes on the television product as they can. And then, the touring, the live events, and the pay-per-views, they sort of help supplement that sort of business.
So when you look at people like the Young Bucks doing their Being the Elite series on YouTube, do you think the kind of thing they're doing, do you think that's a new direction that professional wrestling is going to go into with things like YouTube and people, maybe wrestlers, going into business for themselves in terms of creating their own storylines?
Absolutely. I feel like the Young Bucks are sort of ahead of the curve in terms of reaching their audience without any filters in between. Like, they go directly to their audience with their Being the Elite show. And of course, being a part of Ring of Honor, being a part of New Japan, you can certainly catch them on those events. But if you're a Young Bucks fan, all you really need to do is click on YouTube to see their latest exploits. And I mean, I feel like them sort of going to the fans first, it helps build up the fan base for Ring of Honor, for New Japan, but it also sort of solidifies their own brand, and the fans know that if something cool is happening, they're following them on Twitter, they're following them through their YouTube channel, probably going to their Instagram and sort of seeing what they're doing. The Young Bucks understand that social media is sort of a finger on the pulse of where the fans are at, and so they're keeping their fans abreast of what they're doing and slowly and surely building a fan base that follows them wherever they're going, whether it's Ring of Honor, New Japan, independents on the UK scene, everywhere.
When the partnership between the two companies you just mentioned, Ring of Honor and New Japan, first came around, were you confident that was going to succeed, or were you apprehensive about it at the beginning?
No, I wasn't apprehensive. I've worked for both companies singularly in the past, and knowing that the two companies were coming together to sort of trade talent and work shows together, I felt like it was going to bring a new facet of fresh matchups to both sides. You know, even now coming up, the Global Wars tour that we'll be doing next week, you know, bringing over great wrestlers like Yoshihashi and Toru Yano and Kenny Omega at the top of that. I mean, that's going to bring fresh matchups that people might not have seen already. And so I think that's an interesting aspect for fans in the U.S. to be able to see these Japanese wrestlers and the ones that are basically New Japan stalwarts, bringing them to Ring of Honor and throwing them in the mix with the Ring of Honor roster. It's bringing new, fresh matchups, and it's bringing a level of interest to Ring of Honor as a whole.
We had Frankie Kazarian on the show not long ago, and he spoke about how he kind of felt like he was winning the world title right alongside you when you eventually captured the belt. How important was it for you to share that moment with him? It was very important. I mean, Frankie and I have been side by side for the last 6 years, you know, even dating back to where we were both in TNA. And, you know, we've spent the last 6 years traveling across the world together. So it meant a lot for me to have him in my corner, so to speak, and, you know, sort of back in my play and winning the world championship. Yeah, it was definitely, I was the one wrestling the match, but I wouldn't have been able to do it if I didn't have the support of him over the course of my career. Having now won the world title, is it difficult to continually stay motivated, or do you personally still have goals that you think you have left to achieve?
Absolutely. I still am motivated to compete at a top level. And I mean, it's as simple as wanting to continue to wrestle at a top level. And seeing all the young talent come up and having the opportunity to sort of test myself against them, that's the thing that motivates me now. I mean, yeah, I would love to be world champion again. I would love to hold the World Tag Team Championships with Frankie again. But even if that doesn't happen, I'm still motivated to try and continue and see how long I can go, you know, before I realize that I'm not able to compete at a top level. But I feel like even now, after 24 years, I'm able to wrestle guys that are, you know, 15, 20 years younger than me and still compete and still entertain and still make it worthwhile for a fan to pay money to buy a ticket to see me wrestle.
Yeah. And wrestlers often say that having children changes their perception on their career and the business. What are your views on that?
I don't know if it changed I don't think it changed my focus, really. I mean, honestly, if I look back at the very beginnings of my career, I never said that I specifically wanted to, you know, go to the WWE or get rich or become famous or anything like that. Really, my main goal was to provide for my family doing what I love doing, which was wrestling. And, you know, at the beginning of my career, obviously, my family was just myself and my wife. But now, you know, at this point in my life with 2 children, it's still the goal is to be able to provide for the 4 of us, doing what I do best, which is wrestle. And so, you know, I've been able to follow that passion through 2 different companies and over the course of, you know, my life all around the world. But at its base, it's really just earning a living, doing what I love doing, and being able to provide for my wife, provide for my kids, you know, living a comfortable lifestyle, doing what I'm doing, which is professional wrestling.
Given how much the industry has already grown so much over the last even 5-10 years, this might be hard to answer, but is there one aspect of professional wrestling that you personally would like to see improve or grow in order to help the business as a whole?
Ooh, that is tough, man. Yeah, I guess I would love to see, I guess, more stringent. I don't know if it's a vetting process or whatever for promoters that are coming up. I feel like a lot of independents, a lot of wrestlers now are earning their living on the independent scene. And it's tough because you have to go through training to become a professional wrestler, but anybody with money can sort of become a promoter. And so it's sometimes hard as an independent professional wrestler to know which promotions are legitimate and which ones are sort of just fly-by-night money grabs. So, I mean, I would love to have a more stringent process for promoters to sort of become valid promoters and sort of weed out the guys that are sort of shaky monetarily, and make it safer for independent pro wrestlers to sort of find good work rather than having to struggle to get paid sometimes.
Yeah, it's a good answer. And to finish things off, we ask this to everyone that comes on. What do you think the next 18 to 24 months look like for Christopher Daniels?
For me, a continuous trying to evolve and grow as a worker. For me, and especially for me and Frankie, we're still looking for a good spot for ourselves in Ring of Honor and seeing how we can contribute to our career and use Ring of Honor to sort of propel our careers forward. And at the same time, stay at that top level that Ring of Honor sort of expects us to be at. We're constantly sort of earning the spot that we've got there, and we're continuously trying to improve and try to make it worth ticket buyers, make it worth their while to pay money to see us. And so for us, it's literally a matter of continually growing and continually improving.
Chris, it's been brilliant having you on. Really interesting insight into the business. Thank you for coming on, and best of luck with everything moving forward.
Thanks very much, guys, and I appreciate you having me on the show, and I want to say thanks to the fans that follow you for listening in today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man.